Good morning, MBG family, and thank you so much for being with us today for our next installment of the February Winter Webinar Series. We're really excited to have Joe with us today to talk about what it means to add a winery license to your existing operations. This is something that our brewery members have asked for pretty regularly. We know that consumer preferences are changing. People are looking to add more offerings to their tap room. I believe, and JP is in this chat, in today's webinar, we held an in-person panel discussion at MBGCon that talked about diversifying your offerings in your brewery and what that means and what that looks like and the expense behind it. And I definitely encourage you to talk to other brewers that have added a winery license or a distillery license and just learn, you know, how much did it boost their bottom line? How much of that product is moving? You want to make sure that it's a valuable addition to your tap room and what you're doing. So we've had a really long-standing relationship with the folks at Bowditch and Dewey or Bowditch. They have been partners of ours for 9 years, and they're great about answering questions without the meter running. Joe has been practicing alcohol law for the past 3 years and has been a familiar face at lots of our meetings. So without further ado, Joe, you want to share your screen and take it away?
Of course. So can everybody see my screen now?
Yep, we got you.
Excellent. Well, good morning, everyone. As Katie was mentioning, I got to show my face on this PowerPoint here, so I apologize for everybody for the alarming photo on your screen right now. But yes, Joe Duquette, I work at Bowditch and Dewey. I'm an associate in their commercial real estate and land use practice. I do a lot of permitting work as well as liquor license work. So my focus is very much on, getting these licenses, appearing before local boards, representing breweries, developers, and the like in front of these local boards and getting projects approved. So very much have approached this presentation from that type of lens. But Bowditch is a full service law firm. We do many things, including business and finance. We have a higher education group, trust and estate planning. So it's not just commercial real estate or liquor licensing. We really do the full gambit. So now that the obligatory pitch is out of the way, I'll move on. So what is really the Farmer Series licensing? What is a brief history without a little bit of storytelling, right? So, started in 1977, so it's not a new construct. And slowly over time, they've added farmer brewery and farmer distillery licenses. And then, as people on this call may remember, in 2016, the ABCC decided to throw a little bit of a monkey wrench into the problems with Neshoba Valley Winery, and all of a sudden deciding that holders of these licenses could not pour all of these licenses together on the same premises, which led to a bit of kerfuffle with the legislature and breweries alike. So in later in 2016, Governor Baker signed into law an act relative to the job creation and workforce development, which allowed for this, officially again, the 19H kind of pouring permit that we're going to be talking about a little bit later today, which will allow or now allows um, Farmer Series wineries, breweries, and distillers all to sell on the same premises. So, as I was mentioning, pouring permits under 19B for farmer wineries, which is the subject today, 19C for farmer breweries, and 19EO for farmer distilleries. So this 19H pouring permit allows, so even though every type of liquor license category is separate and distinct from one another, meaning you need to have a floor plan that shows each individual business, um, in separate and distinct locations on the premises. However, a 19H pouring permit allows you to pour anything under your brand name on premises for that consumption. One big thing that, again, taken from 2016, the ABCC is still insistent that there is a prohibition against owning both a retail pouring license as well as a farmer series license. So holding both is still a no-no. But if you do happen to own a Section 12 license, we have represented brewers in the past in kind of changing that ownership or licensure structure um, to a farmer's permit without interrupting operations. It's a bit of a delicate dance, but we have been able to work with the ABCC and the local licensing authorities on approving that. So now, how do I obtain or add a farmer winery license? Um, so importantly, the license itself is issued by the state, not the local licensing authority. And one of the prerequisites for filing for this is amending the underlying TTB license. So you have to go and amend it to, I believe it's a Weiner. I'm blanking on the name of it right now, but it is a specific type of license added. Let me just quickly pull that up. Hold on. A bonded winery. That's the language. In order to have that process, you can apply online. So fairly straightforward if you've been involved or have worked with the TTB in the past. And then once you have that TTB license in hand, you can then apply for the state license. I provided the link in there, which provides a list of the remaining materials that you'll need. And the turnaround time for approval of those applications, assuming that you meet all the prerequisites, is 4 to 6 weeks. And then at that point in time, you still can't pour, but you can store, uh, the liquor, on site because you have the license. You just can't pour it yet. So then to serve alcohol by the glass, you then need to go and get a farmer series pouring permit, either specifically if you just hold a farmer winery license under, I believe it's 19BI, or if you own multiple, you have farmer brewery or farmer distillery license, you can apply for the 19H license. And as part of that process, if you do have an existing licensure, you'll also likely need to submit what's called an alteration of premises application. You can do both of these at the same time, even though they are separate and distinct applications. Um, but again, and that is to basically your floor plan, as I mentioned before, you need to show that you have separate and distinct operations for each type of license that you hold. And then the 19H is kind of like almost an overlay over the entire brewery premises, the licensed premises that allows you to pour, um, throughout. So as I mentioned before, so this is the kind of the bulleted list from the farmer winery license of what you need to provide. So you can see there is some comprehensive information to provide here on the federal level. There are regulations I'm not going to get into on here, but if you do have further questions with respect to those, we're happy to answer them to the extent we can. So yeah, the TTB license, FDA, food facility registration, surety bonds, um, yep, Corey, proof of citizenship. So a lot of this stuff is also required at the local licensing authority level, so it shouldn't be anything that's primarily new to anybody. So then what can a farmer winery licensee do? So Katie has told me that this is a kind of like a much bigger question than what the statute just plainly says. And it's like, really the question is whether or not that's worth it. And I mean, I certainly echo her sentiment that, brewers should certainly be talking to each other about whether or not it was a good value add, good value proposition. I know when I go to breweries with my wife, she's always looking for not necessarily the IPA option. She's looking for, the sours. She's looking for the seltzers. She's looking for, anything that's a little different. So I do understand the need and desire to diversify your portfolios with respect to that, and, happy to assist with that. But so farmer wineries, in addition to obtaining a pouring permit, which will allow you to sell the wine on site, it's also the license you need to pour cider. Um, you're allowed to do 1 day licenses. You can do farmers markets with applications to the Mass Department of Agriculture. and resources. So it does offer some flexibilities, but I can't necessarily speak to the value proposition for your particular business because there's some lead times, which I've gotten into a little bit, the 4 to 6 weeks for the TTB application, another 4 to 6 weeks for the state licensing process, and then an additional 4 to 6 weeks for the local licensing process. So you're looking at least, baking in, 4 to sometimes up to 6 months lead time to, start being able to pour on site. So taking all that into consideration, um, happy to help. So now, as I was mentioning earlier, if you want to do it all, which is great, you do need to have separate and distinct parts of the property. Um, uh, where you can have each type of license. So the farmer brewery, farmer distillery, and the farmer winery. In order to apply for the 19H pouring permit license, you have to complete the pouring permit application. And that's with the local licensing authority. Um, and it's a pretty straightforward process. You just, fill out the application, you check off each license that you want the 19H pouring permit to apply for. And then, provided that the land you own is all contiguous and all part of the same application, and you meet all the criteria, you'll have your approval. But if it's not contiguous, say it's across the street or there are like physical separations, that's a de facto denial of the application. So it does need to be all together on the same property. So as I was mentioning a little bit earlier, some traps for the unwary. So now while um, you there is a process by which you can apply for a new license and continue with business operations. If you've ever heard the phrase, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered, it's still a very kind of political process with, not just your local community, but also with the state, the ABCC. Can change its mind on a whim, seemingly at times. So it's very important to kind of, be transparent with what you're trying to do and try to work with them. We've had scenarios in the past where we thought we had a tacit understanding with the ABCC about, allowing a business to continue with their Section 12 pouring license while they applied for the 19 license. And then in another community was purchasing a Section 12 license. And because we did it at the same time, it just you have to be careful. That it raised red flags on their side. People started asking questions. So it's definitely a delicate dance and one you should certainly engage a lawyer for if you're concerned about, those types of operations. Another issue that I've come across in certain communities, again, zoning lens, some municipalities have different zoning categories and approvals for on versus off premises sales, as well as like if you have a common victualler license and you're selling food, there's different categories for restaurants without a liquor license versus restaurants with a liquor license. So if you're looking to lease or acquire new property, definitely pay attention to what's allowed in those underlying zones because it can be different. It could require a special permit, which is a conditional use, so nothing by right. So you'd have to want to build in that due diligence of making sure that you're able to obtain the special permit before you overcommit to that new license or acquisition of the property. Um, and then, so if you don't own the licensed premises, tenant improvements can be that's an issue that has come up in the past about, who's responsible for tenant improvements, what happens, should, things fail, who's responsible for removing tenant improvements or if they become permanent fixtures or landlord's property. So th those are some additional considerations. You do need to as part of the farmer winery license. Again, separate and distinct facilities, which can involve some interior architectural work. So you want to make sure that that is appropriately addressed in your lease as well. And again, I'll reiterate in bold that there is still a prohibition for the Section 12 and the Farmer Series pouring permits. You can't own them both at the same time. So the way it would work if you have a Section 12 is as you're going and applying, you apply with the understanding that you're going to forfeit your Section 12 license, and that's going to go back to the community. So unlike Section 12 licenses, the Farmer Series pouring permits, there's no limit as to how many can be awarded in a community, whereas Section 12 licenses, there are, um, limits in most communities as to how many are issued. So some other considerations, and again, this is not an exhaustive list. I certainly would encourage, the brewers to talk to themselves about, other benefits and considerations here, like getting names out in the value proposition. But a farmer winery license can serve samples as long as the LLA allows it. They can also get and sell at farmers markets under Section 15F. In that process, you have to go through the Mass Department of Agriculture, which I threw the link in there. But it's a pretty straightforward process through that. I attached the frequently asked questions, but yeah, it's I kind of got through it pretty quickly, but I wanted to kind of keep this as a open conversation with everybody because I do know that this was a something that Katie's been hearing from all of you as to what considerations there are. But I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has. And if I can't answer them now, I will look them up and try to get back to you. And thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. I'll give everybody a minute just to kind of pull together their questions or if they've started the process or if they've are just still thinking about it, what might be coming up in their minds. We chatted a little bit before everyone jumped on that this process is very similar to the distillery license as well. Process is the same amount of steps, different paperwork essentially, but you still have to carve out that space. And I know a lot of folks are thinking about this and as a way to move into the already ready to drink cocktail space as well. Um, so we know that a lot of our members are doing this. It's a great place maybe to ask a question in our Facebook group, in our industry Facebook group, like, hey, for those that have these licenses, are you seeing this is a big bottom line revenue generator for your tap rooms. Um, so everyone's being quiet, Joe.
That's all right.
You
Um,
must have done such a great job that no one has any questions. Um, But yeah,
and
we do know that our friends at the ABCC have been really amenable to trying to make this process as easy and as streamlined as possible. We have had members, cover your ears, Joe, that have done this without the help of a lawyer, and they've been able
that's
to go through the process
mhm.
pretty easily, right? I mean, I think a lot of the what do you think is the heaviest amount of time that you spend throughout this process? Is it attending the hearings?
Mhm.
What are you seeing?
Yeah, so I mean, primarily like with like we don't normally get involved in like the TTB application or anything. So where my involvement comes in is with applying with the local licensing authority, submitting that application, making that compilation, and working with the license commission or the select board to kind of feel out whether or not there's going to be any community pushback on the application. A lot of times there's not, but sometimes there is. So when that happens, just kind of working it out with the community because it's important to be a community partner. There's still for good reason or not, there's still some apprehension about alcohol with in certain residential communities and in certain towns. So they just have a lot of questions, but we've been very successful in transforming those relationships into positive ones. We'll say Trillium as one example in Canton. Very kind of hostile start, a lot of questions, and now every time we go in, they play the band for us. Like they're very
Mhm.
happy. So it's not an impossible task, but it does take work.
One question just popped in. What can be considered a separate and distinct space? Is there a size or space expectation? Sorry if you covered this and you missed it.
Nope. Yeah, so it just has to, so when you have your floor plan, you do need like a certain square footage where any equipment that's associated, or any storage areas that are associated specifically with that license type is kept and stored. And it is completely distinct from other parts of the property where there are other licenses. So that's what you would be called as your licensed premises for the farmer winery would be whatever space it is. So I mean, it has to be large enough to fit whatever equipment and whatever, wine you do want to sell. But as far as like a bare minimum, I don't know if there is a number. It just has to be big enough for your equipment.
I've largely been told by other members that it's about the size of a closet, and then they have like a bucket and some hoses and some
hmm
cleaning equipment in there. And that is their winery or their distillery. There is a new bill on the books that the ABCC is pushing pretty hard to remove the word contiguous with, and Joe, I mean, you could probably speak to this better if you're following it as well, but hopefully that might help to broaden areas of your that you own or that are on your property that you might be able to use for this type. Like if you own a large farm and it's a barn around the corner, that could be your winery. But Joe, if you have any feedback, if you've been following that.
Yeah, only kind of tangentially, but I agree. I think there's constantly methods that the legislature is reviewing to try to make things easier. So, the advocacy from, Mass Brewers Guild, from community members really does go a long way to changing people's minds. Again, I bring up the Neshoba Valley case as like a perfect example. I mean, the ABCC changed its interpretation or like that spring, and 3 months later there was new legislation. So I mean, it can happen quickly if there's a good call and a good reason for it. So making the business case and explaining, this is why we don't have certain things, um,
Yep.
it can make a difference. Sorry, I got distracted with the new chat here.
Oh, no problem. I'm happy to read that out. Currently, we hold a farmer brewery license and farmer brewer pouring permit. We're exploring a shift to a pub brewery license, and at the city level, would therefore be a plan to apply for a 12 malt wine and liquor license and a common victualler. Ultimately, the goal would be to continue selling our beer while also offering cider and wine. Are there any concerns or red flags from your end? Is acquiring a farmer winery license an easier path than from switching over to a brew pub
Yeah,
license? I mean, I mean, I'll just toss out what I've heard, Joe, and then you can pick up where,
please.
yeah. So obviously, the caveat with a brew pub license is that you lose your ability to self-distribute your products, and that's kind of a lot of folks they want to advance their product offerings. They don't want to lose their self-distro rights. So if you are already self-distributing and it is a major part of your business, that is where I would say, you might want to think about doing the farmer winery, to add in your own products.
Mhm.
But go ahead and pick up where I left off, Joe.
Yeah, so, Katie is right, and I do see that you say you're no longer distributing. So I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's not so much about whether it's easy or it's a business decision at the end of the day, kind of as Katie was saying, like what makes the most sense for you. Um, I will say you would have to forfeit your farmer series licenses to convert to a Section 12 license because again, you can't hold both at the same time. So that would be kind of that. just the other direction that I had done it previously. So, and that can come with its own, yes, you would be able to sell other, beers and wines that aren't necessarily yours. So it provides you with that, ability. I do know, at least from, I believe most breweries in Massachusetts do have the Farmer Series pouring permits as opposed to the Section 12 permits. So whatever that's worth, most, I think, brewers prefer the flexibility and the um, of what the pouring permits provide, the Farmer Series pouring permits provide over the Section 12. But if you're looking for more of like I would say, just providing as many offerings as possible that you're not necessarily tied to selling your own product, then Section 12 may make more sense.
Right. Like there's obviously people know what what is it? Like a Stag's Leap Cabernet is, right?
Mhm.
Versus I'm going to pick on a brewery that I know won't be offended, the Jack's Abbey wine, right? Like
Mhm.
that's obviously a very different pull and you know the quality of that wine and others are going to be made, or contracted here in Massachusetts. So you do have to find your contracting partner here locally within the state as well if you're not planning to produce and manufacture your own wine.
Mhm.
Um,
I would also throw out, sorry, make sure that there are Section 12 licenses available in that community. That's not always the case. Sometimes there's a long waiting line. So if you're acquiring a business that has an existing license, great. Um, but that's another consideration is farmer series licenses. You don't have to worry about availability of licenses. You just have to apply. And but Section 12, there could be a long wait list, um, depending on where you are.
awesome. You're welcome. Anybody else have any questions? You can raise your hand and unmute too if you want to spare your fingers. You don't have to put your camera on. We won't make you do that.
I'll also extend because I realize that some people, others may not have been able to join. But if I don't want to offer Katie's email as like a central location for questions, but if you do have more questions about this process, I'm happy to, you know, make an attempt at answering them after this. Um, so
And Joe, that's what my email address is for, to serve as central command. So I don't mind if you want to just email me, and then I'm happy to connect you with Joe as well. But um, all right. Well, I guess we'll give everybody back some of their time today. We really appreciate you joining. We hope you learned something, or maybe, helped you think a little bit more about whether or not this is a path that you want to head down. Joe is available to serve as a reference. I'm certainly happy to help as much as I can as well, though I'm not a lawyer and I don't dispense legal advice. And this upcoming Thursday is our next installment of the series, which is brand storytelling. So I hope everybody has a wonderful week. And thank you, Joe. Appreciate you and all that Bowditch does for our association. We're very grateful.
of course, thanks everybody.
Cheers.